Hi, my name is Jason Clark here at South Dakota State University Extension, and today for our nutrient management topic, we're going to be talking about oat nitrogen recommendations and comparing a yield goal-based system to a maximum return to nitrogen system. So we'll take a quick look at both of these. So our yield goal system is something we've been looking at. If you haven't heard, recently we've changed the recommendations from what you see here to what you see here now. Our coefficient moved from 1.3 to 0.9, and our legume credit after soybeans moved from 40 down to 30. To give us a recommendation moving from what we would have done at 97 down to 41 pounds of N per acre. So this is a yield goal system. You're basing it on your yield potential, multiplying it by a coefficient, and subtracting credits or soil test nitrogen. For our maximum return to nitrogen system, does a little different. Instead of focusing on yield type of situation, it's focusing more on dollars per acre, what we're getting in return for the nitrogen we're putting on our field. So here on our y-axis, we now have dollars per acre. This is our nitrogen rate. We're going to do it. This is an example of one field in Salem, South Dakota. Is we have our nitrogen cost, which is fixed. So every pound of N we put on, it increases linearly. Now, for each of those pounds we put on, we do get an yield return to that nitrogen. So our yield increases, and that return increases in profit until we no longer see an increase in yield by adding more fertilizer N. Now, the profit comes from taking this green line and subtracting it from the blue line. And here we get a curve that looks something like this, where the top of this curve is called our maximum return to nitrogen rate. And plus or minus $1 of that on each side is kind of a plus or minus $1 aspect, gives you a range. So the middle would be 50 pounds, the two ends would be 40 to 60 pounds, which would be the recommendation for a field such as this. So the MRTN system is more of an economic based with lots of these different curves and fields, and the yield goal system is based on yields and coefficients and credits. So if we look at this maximum return to nitrogen across the 28 sites that we have in our oat nitrogen database that you can see here, that average nitrogen was 54 pounds of N that it needed to optimize yield. So if we look here at the amount of nitrogen needed to optimize yield, actually in all these fields, we see quite a range, anywhere from a bunch of zeros all the way up to 125 pounds of N. Now, if we look at that 54 pounds of N that this system is recommending and go plus or minus 20 pounds of that, we're seeing about 6 of the 28 sites out of the total that are in there. We're over-fertilizing about 18 of them, and we're under-fertilizing 4. So then if we're looking at comparing this yield goal to our maximum return nitrogen, which one is more accurate, which one gives us the best economics, that's what we're going to look at next. So here, this graph right here, this is our recommended nitrogen minus our actual needed fertilizer N. So we really want our values to be close to this zero line as much as possible. So if we look at our 0.9 yield goal system, we see this box is pretty evenly distributed around this zero. We have our means and our median here around with a median of about plus 13 pounds of N per acre. So we're over-recommending a median average a little bit. If we compare that to the maximum return to nitrogen recommendation of 54 pounds of nitrogen per acre, we can see that 54 pounds of N is typically an overestimate more often than it is underestimating, plus 48 on average. So that's a big difference. That's fertilizer that we don't need to put in the field that we are putting in the field. However, if we look at our yield goal system, we know this system here subtracts credits, such as soil test N, legume, things like that. The legume's already inherently in this recommendation here based on different response curves, but soil test N not necessarily part of that. So let's go ahead and look at if we incorporate soil test nitrogen into this system, how does it work out? So again, we want above is over recommendation, below the red line's under recommendation, so we want as close to the middle as we can. So we look at our 0.9, we've already seen this, our MRTN full. Now we're subtracting that MRTN minus the amount of nitrogen that's in that top 2 feet of our soil. And once we do this, we see we've gone down dramatically on average from plus 48 to only plus 0.5, showing that this is actually quite accurate and it's very similar to our yield goal system. So both the MRTN and yield goal system, when we subtract the full amount of soil test N in that top 2 feet, work really well. If we don't subtract the full amount of the top 2 feet, let's say only 2/3 or half of that, we then start to move where we're typically overestimating by 25 or 17 pounds of N per acre, which is not what we want to do. So really what this comparison is showing us is I can use a yield goal system or an MRTN-based system and subtract soil test N and get similar accuracies in the long term. So if we're kind of summarize this is our new yield goal-based system. It works really well. That yield goal times 0.9 minus soil test N to 2 feet minus a 30-pound legume credit. Or we can use the MRTN system where we're taking that 54 pounds of N on average and subtracting soil test N of the top 2 feet. Another recommendation, some people are telling me, can't account for previous crop, can't account for soil test N, we're just not sure, what should I do? I'm just not sure of those things. Our best bet, our best estimate there, calculation would be taking that yield goal, multiplying it by 0.6, and that will get you as close as we can get without knowing the other information.